Hey guys, it's episode 9 here of Off the Sidelines Property Podcast. We've got a very special guest on today. She's a rental manager and business owner with a wealth of experience in the rental market, and here to give some advice to our listeners about what to do with rental properties, how to find a good manager, and the process to just make sure you're looking after your property in terms of an investment side of things. Got owners here, my co-host as well.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in again. It's always a pleasure. We've got a really special guest with us, so she's got a wealth of knowledge. Please listen closely. If you're looking to purchase any investment properties or currently have a rental property where you've got a tenant in, this one's going to be a roller coaster. So Danielle, I'll get you to introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about what you do and how you got into the real estate space.
Hi guys, and thanks for having me on. I'm Danielle Hajidavid from Evolution Real Estate. So I've been doing real estate for the last 16 years. So I got into real estate because I used to wash my old boss's hair at a hairdressing salon, and she used to come in and tell us stories about real estate, and she had a reception opportunity come up, and she asked if I wanted to come over and start there full time. So I did reception for 6 months, and then I moved into a sales support role after that, and I've been doing actual property management for the last 15 years.
Wow.
The last 12 months, I've been running Evolution Real Estate, which is my own business. And I've found, obviously the ins and outs on how to run a business, what affects not only the business, the staff, quicker ways to operate, safer ways to operate, and, obviously the difference between being a business owner, being an employee, and how it all runs. So I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is what a landlord expects from a property manager.
Yep.
And how, landlords benefit our business in a big way. And if you don't have the right person looking after someone's greatest asset, then obviously you're going to lose clients so easily. So when it comes to selecting a property manager for your investment, there's all different roles that property managers play. So you can have a BDM, which is a business development manager, and they will initially come out and meet with you and discuss your property and tell you what the property is worth in the rental market.
Right.
They then pass it on to a leasing officer or a property officer that then finds you a tenant for your property. Right. So that's the second person that you will deal with. And then you have the actual property manager who manages your property for the time, that there's a tenant in place. And what people don't realize is that person that you initially meet, your BDM, is not going to be the ongoing person you're going to deal with until the end of the tenancy. Okay. So one question that you would need to ask the person you initially meet is, are you going to be managing my property, or will I be passed on to someone else? So the difference with that, and when it comes to, landlords getting a bit iffy about how many people we're dealing with, they're not asking that question initially, so they don't know who they're going to be dealing with. You might like the BDM, you might like the property officer, but you might not get along with the property manager that's going to be your long-term investment manager. So I think one of the biggest things that people need to do is start researching before you actually start interviewing a property manager. It's just like going for a job. Like if you're not happy with that employer, you're not going to want to go and work in that habitat. If you're not happy with this property manager, you're not going to, trust them to manage your greatest asset. So I think some of the things that people need to look at when engaging a property manager, do your research, Google review them, see how long they've been in the industry. If they've been, a newly BDM for 6 months, how are they going to manage your investment property? They won't have any knowledge of the property market within 6 months. Then you're going to get passed on to a leasing officer. They are just there to make their commissions, lease their property. They're not going to be managing the property. I would be going directly to a property manager, sussing out their experience, their knowledge of the area, and what you're going to get for the management fee you're going to be paying. People shop around for the best management fee. Paying the best management fee doesn't always say you're going to get the greatest service. You've got people out there in this industry that will lower the fee of 3.3% now.
Wow.
And that is unheard of, ridiculous, but everyone does it. Why? To try and get all the managements they can. But what they don't realize is not every management at 3.3% is a good investment to your business. And staff then become overworked because you're getting 100 properties at 3.3%. Great, you're building your rent roll, but you're getting, poor quality tenants. You're getting poor quality owners. You're getting owners that are chasing a fee. Whereas if you're getting owners at 5.5% and you believe that, you're going to give them 5.5% of management fee, your service is not going to change. They're paying you full fees. So why would you be disheartened to give them the service that you're actually expecting your landlord to get? So, I just think that people need to look away from, how much they're paying in terms of fees. Fees is not always your deal breaker. Like I have some clients that have over 30 properties in one portfolio and they're still paying 5.5% for every single property. They see the value they're getting in service. They see what, a 3.3 agent to a 5.5 agent, the difference in service, the difference in caliber of tenants that we put into properties, because at the end of the day, we have to deal with that tenant. It's not, we're not just going to throw anyone into your property to get the property leased and make a commission. We have to have that ongoing relationship with the clients as well with the tenants. So it's, selecting a property manager these days, it's a tough one. Like I would, if it was myself, I'd be going out doing Google reviews. I'll be going to do like a full background check on the property manager because I need to feel comfortable with who's going to be managing it. I need to have the last say of who's going to go into my property, and I want to be overlooking everything that's happening. You don't want to be one of these landlords that micromanage everything, and you want to, take that stress away from you and have a property manager that's actually going to do their job and do it for you. Because at the end of the day, you're paying that fee.
Well, that's a good point, what you said before about the percentage. Like if you work it out, say like an average rental property, say $500 a week, right?
Yeah.
2% on that is $10. That over a year is $500 that you would save in management fees. But if you have $5,000 worth of damage because the manager's not looking after it properly or they didn't do inspections, you didn't really save $500. It cost you $4,500. So what's 1 or 2% at the end of the day? It more comes down to the reference from the people, their experience, what they're doing, that sort of stuff. So a couple of percent really doesn't make a difference. I would prefer to pay more and get quality because there's some things you can cut corners on, but property management, you can't.
You definitely can't. It's like, I get where, a director will say, you're increasing my portfolio by 10 properties a month. But you're also decreasing your portfolio in terms of rental value because your management fees are so low. So the quality of 100 properties that you have, your staff are now overworking themselves. You're paying more in fee, like in wages to service these 100 properties at 3.3%, and they're not actually getting great service at all because you don't care. They're only paying 3.3%. But, people at the end of the day are looking for the cheapest dollar, and it's not always the best case because they're losing out on the other hand. Like you just said, it can cost them $5,000 in repairs because the property manager wasn't actually managing the property. So you're losing at the end of the day.
But then the other people that are doing those low ones, how often are they checking to see if they're getting the market rent or not? How often are they checking to see if the market's changed and they should be getting $30 a week extra? They're probably not doing that. So you get what you pay for.
That's exactly right.
And Danielle, I want to pick your brains on property management contracts, right? So obviously, well, me and you both know that you've got the landlord agreement and the tenancy agreement. Could you share any tips and tricks on what to kind of look out for in a landlord agreement and what landlords should be expecting to pay? So you've got your letting fee, for example. You've got your management fees, which is your ongoing fees. But some organizations charge, extra, right?
Yeah.
So, I just want to get your thoughts on that and what to kind of look out for as investors.
Yeah, sure. It's a very broad criteria when it comes to fees and charges. Every office is going to charge their own fees. But then again, every office service is different and they offer, a bit more or a bit less. So the overall fee that everyone charges is a letting fee. So that's usually around 1 week's rent plus GST when they initially rent the property out. Right. So that's pretty much standard across board. The other fees are, lease renewal fees and lease renewal and preparation. So a renewal is obviously, when you sign up a tenant every 6 or 12 months with the current tenancy, and a preparation when you initially lease the property. You could put whatever dollar figure you want. Some people charge $15, some people charge up to $55, $65. So that's the cost that you put on that. Average is around $33 to $40, a renewal. The other fees that you would be charged is a bank fee or an admin fee. So for transactions and postage and all of that, that can range anywhere from $5 up to $12. Again, wide broad. The other fees that people are charging, they can charge you a one-off advertising fee. So now, realestate.com, they charge you for every single ad or highlight or feature. That ad alone is about $130 per property now. Before that used to be included in a letting fee, but businesses cannot afford to keep including all these advertising in their letting fee. So they'll charge you, a highlight ad for realestate.com or a highlight ad for Domain now. There's all these additional that some people will charge for social media ads. It depends on the property, the location, and, if it's going to be a difficult property, how much you need to spend.
Right.
Other charges will be like tenancy default databases. You've got Ticker, you've got TRA, you've got Vita. They'll charge for those searches. These companies can charge an individual fee. They can charge you a subscription back to the company. But again, you can pass these over to a landlord to pay. Photography, another big one, whether you get photography, floor plans and videos. So all those things, they can range anywhere from $150 up to $600. It all depends on the property. But it's a very wide range of fees that anyone can charge. What you need to be careful of is who's charging you for maintenance. So you can be charged for every single work order that your property manager sends out. Wow. You can be charged for every inspection your property manager does. You can be charged for, like every time they pick up a phone and take a phone call. Anyone can put fees and charges. That's up to the individual office themselves. So it's not like there's a set fee or structure that a landlord has to be charged or an agent can charge. It's up to the agency themselves, and it's up to you whether you're willing and see the value in paying those fees. But it's a very broad range.
And in terms of when you're selling a house, people will go out and get thousands of dollars on photos and all that sort of stuff. What do you think it needs to be done on a rental property? Do they need to go to that sort of justification to promote the property, or do you think if it looks tidy and you can put on real estate, you'll get enough rent, that sort of thing?
Well, the way I sell this to my owners is if you go to realestate.com and you see a photo that I take on my mobile phone and it's not appealing, but you're asking for $600-700 a week rent, are you going to click on that ad and go through it further? You're not, because how can you compare a crappy little ad with a photo taken on my phone to someone else's ad where they've paid for photography and they're asking for cheaper rent or higher rent? It's your first impression is going to be mainly from realestate.com. That's the biggest leading website now. If you have a crappy ad on that website, they're not going to go any further. They're not going to see the value. If your landlord can't spend money in advertising, what makes you think they're going to spend money on their property? This is their asset. This is their one time to try and find a tenant. So I would spend money on photography 100% because you're going to use those photos ongoing. So what's a one-off fee of, $150 roughly?
Oh, so they can use them again after
next
time.
You can use them again.
Okay, that's good.
Provided there's no changes to the property.
Yeah.
Obviously if there's alterations, renovations, you update your photos.
Yeah, fair.
But if you're going to be paying all this marketing, advertising it on real estate, advertising it on Domain, social media, why would you put crappy photos up? And then for difficult properties, we go out and pay for a floor plan. Why? Because the front of the house might look so tiny, there's actually the rest of the house you're not going to see in a photo. So we will have a floor plan to show you how big the property is. The videos, I think, are unless you have a property that, is fetching $1,000 or more, I don't see a video being necessary because it's not really a tenant doesn't go through and look at videos. They go through, look at photos and the space, and then they go and apply. Yeah. That doesn't stay on the market long enough, or it shouldn't, to have to go and pay, $500-600 for a video. Sales, 100%, I can see the value spent, not in a rental property.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. And Danielle, I want to get your thoughts on people selecting a property manager, right? Because not all offices have that same kind of structure where they've got a BDM, a leasing agent, and a property manager. So if it's an up and coming office, what's your advice there? And also, what's your advice on the basics of fire alarms and just general tenant safety?
Yep.
Yeah.
So in terms of property managers, so I don't have a BDM in our office.
Right.
I am the BDM. I also play property manager.
So
I can also play leasing officer.
Jack of all trades.
That's it. And you have to learn. And as a business owner myself, I want to be involved. I choose to be involved. Why? Because I want to know what's going on from start to finish. Yeah. I do have a property manager. I also do have a leasing officer. But I always jump in to just see that they're obviously doing the job that I'm paying them to do, and they're doing it the way I want it to be done. So my clients obviously know, you've got a leasing officer and a property manager to go to, but you always have me to come back to. And I feel like landlords are more comfortable with that because they've got a point of contact being the director. Yeah. And I will always oversee what's going on. Nothing can happen under my, nothing can go unmissed. I will always see what's happening. We run a portal that is cloud-based. So everyone can log on, all of our staff, all of our landlords, all of our tenants. So I can log in anywhere and see where everything's at. Our landlords have the comfort of doing so as well. They can log in and say, well, Danielle hasn't showed anyone through my property today. I don't have any applications. I don't have any rent. They can literally log on and have a look at that. Do you know how many phone calls that eliminates? People could just literally go online and have a look. I don't need to call them and say, oh, by the way, haven't had anyone through today. Don't have any open homes. It's all there.
Right.
So I reckon, like, when it comes to the property manager relationship, the director should always, if they can't meet them in person, give them a phone call saying, welcome over to our real estate. I heard that you've just listed with us. If there's any issues with, so-and-so, please reach out. This is my number. Like, how hard is it for a director to make that call? At least the landlord feels, okay, well, this director's obviously involved in the business. They're going to care a bit more. It's not just, I pass my property on to a BDM or a leasing officer. Who knows how far it's going to go, and then it's going to go to a property manager and what's going to happen. So I just feel like a director should always, just make contact with the client. Like, at the end of the day, they're making the director money as well. It's not just, the property manager gets the wage and that's it. Like, that asset becomes a part of the business asset. One of the big things that I would bring up in terms of an appraisal, at a rental appraisal, what a landlord should do in terms of compliance and insurance. So a lot of people don't know about landlord insurance. Why? I have no idea. Like, you have insurance on your car, you have insurance on your buildings, you have insurance of your rings, and
My
belongings.
dog's got insurance as well.
Exactly. Your dog has insurance. Why would you not insure your property when there's a tenant in there? Like, when you have building insurance, that covers the structure of your home and if anything happens to the building. That doesn't cover if I go put a tenant in your house and they burn down the house. That doesn't cover if I put a tenant in there and they trash your house or they don't pay rent. Landlord insurance is one of the biggest key things that you need before you even lease out your property. You should be looking into not only your property manager, your landlord insurance provider. There are a few big name companies out there. You've got EBN Insurance, you've got Terry Shue, you've got Property Plus. There's so many companies out there now that can actually give you a policy that's within range. It's less than your 1 week's rent. So why people don't have it, I don't understand why. They cover you for rent loss, malicious damage, pet damage, accidental. Like, they're bringing in the rules where you can't say no to pets now. Okay, but if the pet damages the property, is your 4 weeks bond going to be able to cover it? Probably not. So that's why you need landlord insurance with pet cover. If a tenant damages a stone cooktop, a stone bench top, that's a $6,000 stone bench top. Don't tell me your bond is going to be $6,000.
Yeah, no.
So who's going to pay the balance?
Correct.
So they need to obviously broaden their scope of, okay, there's a 4 week bond. What is that going to cover? And why would I not insure my greatest asset? Like, you pay more for car insurance. I'm sure your car insurance is about $1,800, $2,000 a year.
Yeah,
a landlord insurance policy is about $360 to $450 a year.
Oh, wow.
It's ridiculously cheap for what it's insuring. And you're covered, your property's covered, and your tenant. So why wouldn't you have it? And then it also comes back to the agent as well. If they're not educating their landlords as to why insurance is important or why you should have it, it's part the agent's fault as well. Because if you're a new investor and, this is the first time you're doing this, you need to educate your owner and explain to them, these are the importance of owning an investment and this is what you need to do. Compliance checks, smoke alarms. So, there's so many fires. We've seen, yesterday on the news, there was that guy that died in the building at Parramatta because there was no working smoke alarms and the unit was on fire. Wow. And, that's another life lost. And there's so many lives that have been lost because there's no working smoke alarms. Every landlord should have a smoke alarm compliance before the tenancy is even started and then monitor it every 12 months. If you don't do it and something happens, you've got a bigger liability on your hands. Like, that's someone's life that they've lost. And you could have paid someone $99 a year to monitor that for you and give you a certificate. And what they don't realize, it doesn't only protect your property, like your insurance can be void if you don't have working smoke alarms. Like that landlord last night on the news, like if he didn't have smoke alarms, how is he going to be covered with his building insurance? That's a part of the policy. So who's going to pay for his burnt out unit? Like I recently had a house that was burnt out and that was by, someone from the public coming in and setting alight one of our houses. Luckily, we have a compliance certificate for that property. The smoke alarms are in working order. The owner has building and landlord insurance. So not only is his building insured, he gets a whole new rebuild or refurb out of it, he also gets rent up until it's all done.
Oh, wow.
So that's where landlord insurance came into play because he now gets rent for a house that has to be rebuilt. If he didn't have landlord insurance, he'll be out of pocket paying a mortgage for a house that doesn't even exist.
Wow.
If he didn't have a building insurance policy with working smoke alarms, he would have a burnt down house with a block of land he would need to sell. So people need to, like, it comes back to really the property manager. You need to educate your owners. Don't sit there at an appraisal and bluff up how much your property is worth and what I can get you just to sign a piece of paper and get the property on the market. Educate that landlord at that meeting. This is what you need to know as a landlord. This is your obligations. For me to do my job, this is what I need you to do. And if we can't work together to make sure that this is going to be a safe tenancy for yourself, for myself, and for the tenant, then it's not going to work. If you can't educate your owner from day one, you're going to have problems down the track. And if people are going to knock back getting a smoke alarm certificate for $99 or a pool compliance certificate for $110, you don't want them as a landlord. Like, imagine when you need repairs done and they don't want to even spend that. So then it's going to come back on the agent for not doing their job as an agent to get maintenance done.
Well,
Yeah,
that was in depth.
very good.
What I got out of that was get a good property manager and get insurance.
And get your smoke alarms.
Oh, smoke alarms 100%. Like, why you wouldn't get that done is beyond me. Like, even if your landlord wouldn't get that done, you as a tenant should be like up in arms about it and red flagging this to the agent.
Yep.
Because I, as a tenant, if I had to put a smoke alarm just to ensure my contents insurance was covered, I would be putting that in an email to the landlord and to the agent saying, you don't have working smoke alarms. I put one in temporarily until you get someone out here. Because a tenant's insurance is not covered either.
Wow.
So if that tenant has contents insurance and they don't have a smoke alarm, their contents isn't covered.
Wow.
So
it's a
people
massive
don't understand.
ripple effect.
It's a ripple. Yeah, it definitely is a ripple effect. You're
everyone's
affecting the
impacted.
landlord, the agent, and the tenant. You're all in it together.
Really important.
And in terms of what you just said, like it's not much money, the difference between a good property manager and a bad manager, but from what I can understand, it could cost you thousands if you get a bad one. Have you got any stories of any bad properties you've taken over?
Oh, we have plenty that we've taken over. And there's a reason why we've taken over, because property managers just don't like doing their job. And it's not only the property manager's fault. Like, a lot of property managers have left the industry because they're just overworked.
Yeah.
And they cop abuse from the tenants left, right, and center because their landlords aren't educated to do what they're told, what they need to do. Like maintenance. How many tenants do you hear about leaving properties because their landlords never do repairs? Like, it's not the agent's fault. They're trying to get it done through the landlord. The landlord refuses the agent to do it. There's got to come a point where you put on your agreement, I'm not going to call you if there's any repairs under $500.
Yeah.
If there's anything over that amount, then I'll call you. But other than that, we're going to do any repair under $500 that we feel is necessary to have, to have done, like at your benefit as well. After hours emergencies, the tenant can spend up to $1,000 on repairs. If you don't get it done within working order, like working hours, and the tenant goes and has it done after hours, they've got up to $1,000 to spend. Wouldn't you want to pay a plumber and get it done during working hours and pay $300 and the tenant get it done and, give you $1,000 bill? Because it's after hours, but people don't see that until they get stung with that bill. Like, we've recently taken over files from other agents and they haven't done inspections for over 18 months.
Wow.
Like, a lot can happen in, a couple of weeks, let alone 18 months. Like, how many times this year have we had floods? So all those floods, all the roof leaks, all the repairs haven't been touched. Why? Because the tenant has just given up reporting it. No inspections have been done. The agent hasn't even physically been to the house to see if there's something the tenant hasn't reported. Like, today I did inspections and there was houses with, roof leaks and mold in it.
Wow.
This agent that we have taken over from, they haven't even been to the house and they've had it for 6 months. Like, I know, times are tough, COVID, we couldn't do inspections. COVID is no longer an excuse. So many files we collect and they're like, oh yeah, the agent couldn't come because of COVID. Mate, we were doing inspections last year during COVID. There was ways around it. The tenant was happy to leave the property, let us in to do the inspections, or there was the cloud-based system that we used that allowed the tenant to do the inspection themselves. There's ways around it. But property managers are becoming so lazy or complacent, or they were working from home, had other things to do, or they just gave up because COVID just tested everyone's patience. We had, tenants at our head, we had landlords, tradesmen, all the new legislation that came in. Property managers were just going insane. And so many people I know personally left the industry because it just got all too hard. And the ones that could soldier on are still here today, still doing it. But it's so hard to find property managers that are able to do their job, not get exhausted, and be able to put on a front and show up the next day, even though the day before they were a punching bag for every landlord and tenant. Like people think property management is easy. It is not an easy job. And what directors don't see is it's actually it's like a mentally disturbing job when it comes to, dealing with all the tenants' problems, the landlord's problems, and then you've got a staff member that comes in with their own problems, taking on everyone else's problems, and wonder why, the property manager needs stress leave and needs to take annual leave. Like directors need to understand that property managers cop it from every angle, and they need to look after them. The property manager is looking after your biggest asset. So why would you not look after them?
Absolutely. And how do you think that the property management game has changed over the years? Like now, you were saying that people can take their own pictures or inspections and things like that. So I feel like it's becoming better for property managers to manage the system, but also from
it is harder.
It is harder.
I like how you say it's becoming better. It's not becoming better.
So
they expect a lot more from us now.
Yeah. What about technology and like all these new kind of improvements?
Technology,
and
they
apps
have
and stuff?
improved. But
Right.
our job has become harder because there's so many changes to legislation that's, all for the tenants. So if
Could you touch on that? Any examples on that?
Okay, so new laws that they're bringing in on pets.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of landlords would say, I'm not putting a pet in my house. Well, there's now becoming a rule where you can't say no. So you're going to have a pet in your house. And we have landlords, I have a landlord that's allergic to pets. So what, my landlord can't move back into his house because he had to allow a dog in the house prior to him moving in. Like there's just, and then we had, changes with a house and granny flats. Water meters separating, you need to now have 2 meter readings on a water bill. If you don't have that, you can no longer charge water usage. What about all these people that built houses in granny flats and didn't have them separately metered? They only have a sub-meter. You can no longer charge water usage. So now they're out of pocket. And then we had changes with, obviously the compliance changes. 100% I agreed with that because there was so many, compliance checks going under the radar and people weren't fined enough for not doing their job. Like pool compliance, how many pool deaths did we have? Smoke alarms, how many fire deaths did we have? Like those things needed to be changed. And then you have, all the termination periods. They changed from giving a tenant 60 days notice to vacate after a periodic lease to now 90 days.
Yeah.
And now they're removing the no grounds. You can't evict a tenant on no grounds now. You need to have a legitimate reason why. And you can't, fabricate a story, the landlord's going to move in and then you re-advertise it for $100 more. No, the tenant can now go you for that. So, there's a lot of changes that have happened and it's put a lot of responsibility on the property managers because we've had to go back and learn. We now have to go and update our training, CPD, every year to try and learn the new rules, the regulations, legislations to try and educate not only our landlords, but our tenants. So I wouldn't say that property managers have it easier now. Yes, we have systems to try and help it and to become a lot easier, but it hasn't changed our workload. The only thing that's really changed is, the efficiency in getting stuff done now. So, a cloud-based system, we can do the inspections on our phone rather than handwriting the inspections and uploading photos and sending them off to our owners. Yes, that cuts time. Sending automatic receipts when tenants pay rent instead of posting out receipts. Yes, that saves time, but our job hasn't changed. Like it is still harder and there's a lot of obligation on the landlord and the property manager just as much as the tenant. Like tenants think they have it easy now, but they have to go through a full screen check when they apply for a property. Like tenants even have pet resumes. They need to go and do their own screening check. They can pay for their own Vita checks or to just apply for a property. Like, tenants think that they have it hard. Landlords have it just as hard and vice versa.
I think it's gotten easier for landlords though, because from a landlord perspective, you can see what's happening in terms of the inspections. You don't have a property manager that goes, I've done inspections and they never sent you anything. They just log into their portal. They can see the inspections. They can read reviews online to see if the rental managers have good reviews, things like that. So from a landlord perspective, it's probably, I think, easier to find a good rental manager but know what's happening with your property.
Yeah.
That's what I think has gotten easier from a landlord perspective. What do you think?
In search of a property manager and, to overview it all.
To find a good property manager.
Yeah, definitely that part has become easier. But as a job for a property manager, it definitely hasn't become easier. It has become harder. In terms of, social media Google reviews, there's good and bad in that. So you can get a tenant that, did wrong by the landlord or wrong by the agent that will give you a 1-star review and that ruins your whole Google review.
Yeah.
Like your stars can drop dramatically from one tenant. and you were doing the right thing as an agent, that tenant just didn't agree. You could do the right thing by a landlord, but they didn't agree with, what you did, and then go and put a bad review. And then how does that look, as an agency? You're now down to 4 stars because of a landlord or because of a tenant.
Yeah, okay.
So, Google reviews are a good and a bad thing. They are good because obviously you get to see both sides. People review them being good, people that review them being bad. But then you get, how many haters go and review the opposition? Why? Just to try and, diminish their character and their business and to make sure their Google reviews go lower and lower. Why they do it, how pathetic is it? Like, come on. But people do it. And again, now their Google reviews have gone how low? All because someone makes fake accounts and goes and, puts it all over their opposition's pages. Yeah. Social media, they do the same. How many pages are bagging out other agents?
A few I've seen from you the other day.
Yeah, a few. So, and it's like, social media is meant to be helping us, advertising, opening up to landlords, tenants, tradies, and, they're passing around, bagging each other out on social media, other agents. Like, why? There's plenty of properties out there for everyone. There doesn't need to be all this hate in the industry. Like, real estate agents bagging each other out. Like, there's landlords out there that are seeing you guys fight and bag each other out. Do you think, like me as a landlord, I wouldn't want to go and list with an agent that's bagging another agent out. Do you have time to sit there bagging other agents out? I want you to manage my house, not manage, who's getting the highest Google reviews or who's selling the most properties. That to me, I don't care about that stuff. I just want to make sure my property is looked after.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the good part about the way that it's moving forward is with the rent that we've got in a lot of places, like a lot of people haven't upped their rent in a long time. So now they're saying, well, interest rates are going up. I'm scared. But it's like, well, if you haven't had a rent review in 3 or 4 years, then what are you doing? Like, get your rent increased.
Can I tell you how many landlords I've had in that boat? So recently when I've picked up files and I've had to review their rents, they haven't, because they've been long-term tenants over, 2-3 years, they haven't given them not one rent increase.
Oh.
And when you go back to them and question, how come they've stayed on, this rent amount for so long? They're like, oh, no one's thought to review it or call us about it. They just asked if they want us to renew the lease. So now they're behind market, minimum $100 a week. How do you go and give a long-term tenant a $100 rent increase?
It's hard to do in one go. It's almost impossible, right?
And you can only give one increase in 12 months. So for me to give a long-term tenant that's been there for 5 years, here's $100 because you haven't had a $100 rent increase because you haven't had one for, 4 or 5 years, that's like a slap in the face. They turn around and say, well, I've been a good tenant, that's why my rent hasn't been increased. But I'm sorry, you're behind already $100. Imagine in 2 years' time if it goes up again. Like, you're going to be way behind. Like, landlords now are trying to catch up with the market and trying to issue all these rent increases. If you did that regularly every year by $5 or $10, it's better than hitting a tenant with a $100 rent increase.
Sure.
Like, it's not a little bit of money. That's $400 a month.
From the landlord's perspective too, like that, they're the one to blame because they haven't had a rental manager that's doing rental increases every 6 to 12 months. So when interest rates go up 2% in the last few months, or another 2% in the next few months, like, that's their fault. Like, they haven't utilized a good rental manager to look after their asset properly and get that. So now interest rates are going up and you want to cry wolf, like, that's on you.
Yes, it's their fault, but it's also the property manager. It's part of their job, and it's in their agreement, if all the agreements are the same and they tick the same boxes, to do rent reviews. So if they're not doing rent reviews, well, they're not doing their job.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It should be them that's reviewing the properties before they renew a lease to say, hey, Mr. Smith, your rent is now, due for a review because you're $15 behind the market. Okay, great. Give them a $10 rent review. Keep it under the market value, but at least we're still reviewing it and it's still slightly going up. Not wait 5 years and be like, okay, the market's changed. We've had 3 interest rate rises. Here's $100. That's when the tenants leave. And then you end up with a vacant house.
From the landlord perspective as well, though, if they're paying someone money to do a job and they're not doing it, and you're letting them do it for 3 years, that's on the landlord as well, you know what I mean?
It is, but has that landlord been educated?
Exactly right.
Does the landlord know his rights and what the property manager should be doing? Because if you're a new investor, you're just taking what the property managers told you they're going to do. They're just going to manage the house, renew the rents, renew the leases, and that's it. There's no talk of, hey, I'm going to call you every quarter and we're going to review your rent to see if you need a rent increase. They don't sit down and have that conversation with you. But if you're going to call up and say, hey, can you give my tenants a rent increase? They'll be like, yeah, no worries. If you don't call them or if you don't prompt them to do it, it's up to them to tell you. So like, who's increasing the rent if your property manager isn't? You have to ask for it, but you shouldn't have to.
Well, I guess that comes back to where we talked about at the start, where you got to find the right manager. So if you're just picking someone off Google who's 3% and then they don't increase your rent in 3 years.
Or you pay for what you get.
Exactly. So
pay peanuts, you get monkeys.
If you're doing the due diligence at the start, finding a rental manager with the right qualifications, the right experience and things like that, then you're not going to have those problems, are you?
Yeah, that's 100%. Why you need to iron it out at the first interview. Like, just like you're going for an interview at a job, or, you're interviewing someone. Like, I would have a list of questions to ask and be like, okay, we're going to sit down. It's going to feel like an interview, but you're going to be managing my biggest asset. I'm going to ask you all these questions. If that property manager can't sit there and answer the question, get them out.
See you later.
Move on to the next one. How many property managers are there? Like, it's an insane amount. You look at one suburb, look at Blacktown. You can't tell me there's less than 100 property managers just in Blacktown. If you have to go through 5, 6, 10 property managers just to find the good one, do it. Waste the time and do it. Because, like, finding the right person, it would cost you a lot less than picking the cheapest person that you've just found and said, yep, okay, no worries, you're going to give me a high rental income. Go and take it and lease it out for me.
And how would you get people to find out, like, is there a way when you talk about percentages and then fees and charges, does the rental industry have a percentage which is all the fees and charges and everything included in terms of that?
Not at all.
So then they have to really dig down and compare and go, well, Alison's charging me $660 a month admin fee, Johnny's charging me $780, but this is 2% and then this is 4%, and it's really hard for them to.
And you know what's so silly? Like, I've had landlords that will say, okay, but the guy down the road is going to charge me 5.5% and include all my other costs.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. So, like, when it comes to, they were happy to negotiate all those fees and wipe everything. So when it comes to me increasing your tenant's rent, you're happy for me to just be like to the tenant, okay, yep, I'm going to be an easy negotiator. Don't worry about the rent increase, and I'm not going to work for you either. Because the landlord, if he can negotiate and wipe all those fees and only pay one minimum fee of, 5.5% because that's all he wants to pay, okay, if I'm happy to accept that, I'm going to accept your tenant when they want to come and negotiate me when it comes to lease renewals, rent reviews, and all of that. You need to tell them what you're worth. If they're not happy to pay what you're worth, go and pay someone that wants to do a quarter of the job that you're going to do. They're paying for a minimum percentage, 5.5 with no other fees. Come on. Like, who's going to work for that? People advertising 3.3 and 4.4, I wouldn't touch them. Because if you think that that's what my job is worth, go find someone else. Because 100%. I know the hours that go into it. I know the the overheads. Like, I see the cost every month of what it costs to run a property management division. I'm not taking anything less than 5.5%. It's not worth our time. And it's not worth the stress on the staff overworking them just so at the end of the day you're saving $5 a week.
Yeah,
you pay more for that on coffee.
And that's a good point. And I think it just comes back down to we've got to make sure that you're looking for the right people at the right places. But I think coming down to your point, interview as many people as you can.
Yep.
And then obviously if you smell fire.
And speak to other people with investments. Like, I'm sure you know someone with an investment property. Like, speak to them. Who manages your property? What do you get for the money? What do they do that you're happy with that you're not happy with? Speak to other people about it. Like, there's so many other, property management, investor chats, or, how many groups on Facebook. You can all put in your ideas, reach out to people, get their opinion as well. Because at the end of the day, there's more than one investor. You're not the only one. So speak to other people that have the experience and see what you should look out for. Because jumping into this and just selecting anyone off the street for cheap fees, I'm telling you right now, that's the biggest mistake you're going to make.
Yeah.
And you'll go to a more expensive agent later that has to clean up your mess, and you're going to pay double. I love when landlords come to me and say, oh, can you do cheaper? They go down to another agent that will charge cheaper. They'll come back in a couple of months and say, my agent hasn't done inspections. My tenant's not happy with the agent. Okay, cool. Now you're going to pay my full fee.
Yeah.
Or more.
Or more. Yeah, a cleanup fee, a takeover fee.
Yeah, nice.
And Danielle, under what circumstances do tenants not pay rent? So we were talking about smoke alarms recently. So I'm aware that if smoke alarms aren't correctly installed, tenants can forego rent for a period of time. Is that correct?
Definitely not. And whoever told you that, I hope that's not an agent. Because when it comes to repairs and maintenance, if a tenant stops paying rent, they're actually in breach of their tenancy. So not only is the agent and the landlord not doing their responsibility of maintaining a property and doing repairs, the tenant is also breaching their lease. Your rent has to be paid on time at all times, regardless, whether repairs are done, whether you've got a leaking roof, a missing ceiling, whatever it may be, you don't stop paying rent. And one of the biggest things tenants do is, my landlord's not doing repairs, I'm going to stop paying rent. The only person that affects is the tenant. Why? Because their rental ledger is going to show that they're always in arrears. And when it comes to them finding a new property, that's their ledger. It's permanent on their ledger. They need to explain to the next agent, I stopped paying rent because the owner didn't do repairs. A property manager won't touch them. Because if you're going to do that now, you're going to do that the next time that I try and call my landlord, don't get a repair done, you're going to do the same thing. So a tenant should never stop paying rent. If I was a tenant and the property wasn't being maintained, repairs weren't getting done, email, everything in writing. If you can't get through to that property manager, an urgent repair, you've given them 48 hours, you say to them, you call them. If it's an urgent repair, I'm going to get it done. Email them. After hours, I've got up to $1,000 to spend. I'll get the repair done myself and send you the invoice. I guarantee you the property manager will jump straight down the landlord's throat and get that approved. You cannot stop paying rent. It doesn't matter what the circumstance is, you need to pay. There's been, during COVID, how many tenants lost their job, couldn't afford rent. We had, high rental arrears because, people had to stop working, couldn't travel to work, all of that. There were subsidies in place. The agents just needed to direct the tenants to the right avenues. They could get help. They could get support. But if property managers weren't educating the tenants, hey, if you're suffering in this department, this is who you can go to. Like we've had tenants with, unfortunate circumstances where they've, lost their job or lost a partner or, something that you cannot control.
And we've hardship, for example.
Hardship. Yeah. And we've sent them to, government funding or, Salvation Army will help you, Anglican will help you. There's other, places that will actually help tenants. Like there's places that will give you bonds, for example. If a tenant has to move out but they can't afford to get another bond. There's bond loan companies that people don't even know about. There are ways to help tenant, whether it's, bonds, rent, hardship. The property managers just need to make them aware of it. And, there's obviously tenant groups and advocates that they can obviously engage in and get advice as well. But you should never stop paying rent. It doesn't matter what the circumstance is. It's only going to affect the tenant at the end of the day.
Yeah, interesting.
So whoever told you to stop paying rent for smoke alarms, don't be their friend.
Tenants, pay your rent.
Pay your rent or, you'll have to deal with the wrath of Danny.
Yeah.
But thanks heaps for that, Danny. We'll wrap it up now. We've gone overtime on the podcast. We could have went on for another 40.
Oh, easily.
But
thanks for having me.
Thanks for jumping on. And just to wrap it up, it sounds like the key things from our experienced rental queen, Danny, is to make sure that you find the best quality manager. Do as many interviews as you need to. If you need to interview 5 to 10 managers, do that to make sure you find the right fit. But also make sure you check the agreement for the fees and charges to make sure they're not stinging you with little things on top. And they might say, hey, it's only 3 or 4%, but you've got $2,000 in fees. Yeah.
But
and
then
compliance
again,
and landlord insurance.
Everything's tax deductible as well. So
of course it is. So why not pay it?
Stop being a tight ass,
You pay more when you go and eat out and have coffees every week. Come on, it's a fee.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd be paying more of a fee to get the job done properly.
Yeah.
Tax deductions, we like it. That might lead into our next episode.
Get a nice accountant on the
nice
pod.
segue.
Yeah.
But thanks again, Danny.
No worries.
Danny.
Thanks, guys.
You've been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.